So Lex, will you lead us in the invocation and the pledge? Lex.
Hold on. Okay. I had everybody else muted. I could not hear you until I just turned my volume on. So now I can hear people. Sorry.
Okay. Can you lead us in the invocation and the pledge?
Yes, sir. If you're ready to start.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll start us. Our gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for today. We thank you, Lord, for this time. We thank you, Lord, for our school district and the people that work in our school district and the students. And we pray and ask you to continue to bless them. Lord, I just pray a special blessing on this board and myself, Lord, that you would just grant us the wisdom to make the right decisions and all that you would have us to say and do. So just be with us today, Lord. Of course, in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, please join me in the pledge. Amen. To the flag, one nation, under God,
Thank you, Lex. I appreciate that. We received no requests from the public for any public comments today. So we're going to skip that section and go on to closing and adopting the agenda. Board members, you should have a copy of that agenda. Do we have a motion to close and adopt?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to close and adopt the agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to close and adopt the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Our first item is a presentation on the budget. Ms. Penner.
Hello. I have a presentation I'm going to try to put up on the screen. It should be short, and then we can have any questions. Okay, you should be seeing, hopefully you're seeing my screen. Wanted to give a little bit of a budget update as far as the 2021 budget and what we are doing in anticipation of this budget. So as we know, the budget right now has been approved by the legislature, but it has not been approved yet by our governor. At this point, we're understanding that he's waiting, as most of us are, to find out what the federal dollars are going to look like. Unfortunately, at this time, the federal dollars, none of which are here, or none of which that have been issued so far are available to be used for any kind of a revenue reduction, which means all the sales tax dollars that we are not seeing coming into the state are not going to be, at this point, made up for by federal dollars. So that's really where the concern is as of yet, that the state will have a shortfall that the federal government is not going to help us with. Now, you know, we're still waiting on that, I should say, not that they will not, but we're still waiting on that. The current 2021 budget would require us to have to make some budget cuts. The FRS rate increased pretty significantly. We're also seeing some decline in revenues from interest earnings, which we had been earning a little over $250,000 a year in interest, and we're seeing a decline to where we're earning right now about half that. So we were already looking at needing to make some cuts for the 2021 budget, and that doesn't even include what may come down as a result of the stay-at-home order and the loss of revenue collections. And I just wanted to bring up and sort of walk you through a little of what we went through last time we had one of these recessions back in 2007 and 8, and one of the reasons we want to sort of get ahead of this. What you should be seeing now is just sort of a timeline of the way the cuts came down when the recession came about in the 2007-8 year. We started our budget as we normally do in 2007-8 in July, and then, hired teachers and everybody back in August. And then they revised the FEFP in November to cut at 1.4%, revised it again more significantly in March. So there were 2.73% of cuts that were made after we had developed our full budget in the 2007-8 year. We continued to see cuts during the 2008-9 year. The only cuts that came through that were timed well for us to be able to make them during the budget adoption cycle were the 1.84 that came in during the conference reports. But then we had another 2% cut in January. So while we're sitting here watching the governor with the budget on his desk, and we're hearing that we're not thinking that there need to be cuts made to that budget for the 2021 year, the most recent history shows us that we don't see those when we're trying to develop the budget for the particular year. So just wanted to bring that forward. And then the other, this is a recap of, this is the total state funding over the last 10 years up until 17-18. And the line that you're seeing represents the per student allocation through the FEFP formula, and the numbers on the right are what that line is representing. So back when the 7-8 budget was developed, we had revenues per student, per FTE, of about $7,300. You can see that that line did not go back to that $7,300 until the 2017-2018 year. So those cuts, that 6.5% that was cut over those 2 years, it took us 10 years to get back to where we had been. So just to try to give you a feel for some of the concerns that I have as we're moving forward, and we're seeing that the folks developing the budget, the folks that are approving the budget are not necessarily making any cuts at this time. Unfortunately, history has shown us that the cuts don't always come at the beginning of the year, and it takes a very long time for us to recover from those cuts. So with that said, we are working on the 2021 budget, and we just want to be ready without having any major disruption. We had some major disruptions that took us years and years to recover from when the 2007-8 recession kicked in. So we are anticipating that there will be budget cuts and planning as though those will happen. We are planning for what we could possibly do if we had a 5% cut that was made over the next 2 years. That roughly equates to about $3.8 million. As it stands now, we have 35 positions that are being vacated. Nobody is being cut because of any thoughts that there will be a loss of revenue. These 35 positions are your regular retirements, people who have told us they're not coming back next year, as well as just the regular non-reappointments that we have at the end of every year. So we have that. That's roughly about $2 million, a little more than $2 million, if we were not to fill those positions. But at this point, we're just sort of looking at all of these and trying to figure out what the best scenario is. So again, at this time, really, we're just looking at it, we're planning, and want to make sure that we're proactive when it comes to this, just because history has told us that we don't always find out before we hire folks back that we're going to get the budget cuts that we have to deal with. So that was really all of my presentation at this time. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
I have questions, Mr. Chair. I have questions.
Let's go to Mr. Hudson first.
So Mrs. Penner, the 35 positions that we're looking at now, I guess we're saying that these are basically non-essential positions? Or is that what we're saying? Or
No, I think
well, maybe you might want to answer that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Ms. Penner, Mr. Hudson, what we have is we have 13 people that we have not reappointed for performance, basically. Four non-instructional positions and 9 instructional positions. What the 35 units are retirees, and then those 13. There's some of those are essential. 2 of them are ESE teachers ways, and so they're essential. We're just holding them right now and not replacing them as we speak, because we want to see what the governor does in the next week or 2 with the budget. Right now, he doesn't even have it. Once he gets it, he has 30 days to decide, to veto or what not to do, to sign it. So you're looking at mid-June before he ever makes a decision. So the 35 units that she's talking about are not necessarily not essential. They're just units that are vacant as we sit right now. Only 2 units of those 2 units were employees that would have liked to come back. One of them was a program at Columbia High that we're going in a different direction on, and another was a pair at Melrose that was not coming to work. So all the rest of them were people that the principal or the director decided they didn't need. But they may be essential. It's just we're holding them right now.
So basically, we're looking at attrition for the most part on those.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we may fill them. We're not saying we're not going to fill them. We're just saying that I don't know if the governor, the commissioner understand, because they're not educators to speak, that once they give us a budget in July, once we hire people, we're locked in for those people for the year. It's not like a business where you can just make a decision midstream and save a whole bunch of money. Our payroll is 85% of what we do. And so if they go back to 2007 and make a decision to cut things, then it's payroll. And I've had conversations, and I know that it's a slippery slope. I know it's a fine line between us getting behind the districts around us if we don't open these up and hire these people. And so we're just trying to make a solid decision that supports our education and maintain the highest education academically that we can, but at the same time, being prudent with our budget and our revenue. And so we're not saying to y'all as a board that we're not replacing these 35. What we're saying to you right now is we want to hold them another week or 2 to see what the governor kind of says and does. And then, and at the very least, we wanted our principals and directors to have a plan. If 2007 and 8 comes back, we want them to understand that they have to start prioritizing the important things that they want to keep. So that's I hope that answers your questions, Mr. Hudson.
Well, I understand that, and I think it's easier, less painful this way than it is to hire people and then have to lay them off. I lived through that recession, and I know Mr. Nelson did, and it was a very difficult time. So at least until we get some kind of an idea of where we're going to be in the beginning. That's all I have on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. I think Ms. Giddens had a question.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe along the same lines that, my concern is, I know some of these are essential positions, and I've looked online on some of their surrounding counties, and they are, advertising. Some of our neighboring counties, they are advertising for positions, that quite a few positions, and I just don't want us to, miss out on some good teachers, for these essential positions, if, and I want to be certain that we get the best teachers and that we're not hiring at the right time, so I'm just concerned that, right now, if we need to be hiring teachers for essential positions, these aren't just not just paras are essential, but, if we need good math teachers and good science teachers, that we're advertising for them. Because I know in Alachua County, they're advertising for teachers, they're advertising in Union, they're advertising in Gilchrist. And, if we're going to need teachers, then we need to be hiring them. That's my concern, that we're not, that we have the teachers in place in August that we need. And I'm concerned about that. So that's my concern. I discussed this with Mr. Carswell earlier today. And so I'm just putting that out there. I know that there are some budget concerns. And of course, I started whenever we had just barely a 1%, to put back. And I don't want to be in that position again, but I also want to be certain that we have quality teachers on board whenever the school starts back, and I want to be certain that, if the time comes, then we have the money that whatever positions that we've taken away from Columbia High School and Fort White High School, or, the sixth grade center, that they get those back if we have the money in place. So that's my concern. And I want to make certain that that's, what's happening. So, Mr. Cardwell,
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. If I might, I just want to echo what we just talked about. We did have a conversation this morning, and absolutely, we want that, what Ms. Brady Giddens just said. I mean, with the quality of education in Columbia County has risen, I believe, over the last 10 years, off the charts. I mean, when you look at what we're doing with graduation rate, what we're doing with A schools and things like that. So we want to continue that. I would simply ask the board, maybe, because it is a fine line, hiring, that we may wait at least until the governor has made a decision about the budget. And once, and I could have staff, as a matter of fact, I asked Ms. Penner this morning, Mr. Whittergan, and now Ms. Jernigan's joined me, to ask them to get the principals and the directors to send them a list right now. They already have, but I want to see it again, of all their people that they are missing, all the units that we are not replaced as of right now. So we can start formulating a list, and the subject area if they're a teacher, so we can start looking at, because I mentioned the 2 ESE teachers at Pathways. If we're going to have Pathways, we will have to have those 2 ESE teachers at Pathways. And so we need to start prioritizing district-wide, maybe critical need areas where we have to start looking, and we might be able to open some of those up in the next few days and maybe in the next week or so. So if the board is okay with that or whatever, we're at y'all's discretion, obviously, because this is a budget issue. So if y'all will just give us some guidance, and we'll move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Johns.
Yeah, I'm real concerned when you even said the 2 teachers at ESE teachers at Pathways. That's a huge concern. And if it is possible that we can hold off until the governor makes a decision, that's what I would like to do. I think that's in the best interest of our students.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Smith.
I want to know if last year, did we have any positions that were not filled? And if those positions are part of what they are referring to in these 35 positions that they'll have on the agenda?
Mr. Nelson, board chair.
Yes.
Ms. Smith, I do not think we did. That's a question we'll have to probably get a final answer for you after the meeting today. As I recall, and I'm getting older, so my recollection's not as good as it used to be, but I've got Hope and Todd and Bonnie and all in here, so they could correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe last year we moved forward the units we had in 18-19. We moved forward those units to 19-20, I believe. I don't think we made any cuts last year to personnel or staff or units. But that's the best I can recall right now. I will have someone research that and get that out to all y'all before in the next day or two.
Thank you, Mr. Carswell. Any other questions from the board? Relax. What I'm just listening to everybody, I think that I agree. We need to we don't really know until we know. So as soon as the governor gets something out, we probably need to set up a budget workshop. We haven't done that in a while. So as soon as you get that, we need to sit down, because I agree with Ms. Giddens and Ms. Smith, Mr. Hudson. We want to hire the people that we can, and we want to make sure we've got everybody that we need to provide the level of quality we've been doing. But at the same time, we need to know what we can afford, and we don't know that right now. So I think as soon as we get that from the governor, Bonnie needs to do a review of it, and then we need to have a workshop. And if we could figure out how to do that on site, I think that might do better, because I really think we need to, maybe we can distance ourselves, but we'll figure something out for that as well. I think that may work better. All
Yes,
right,
sir.
we'll move on to our first action item, and that is the approval of personnel. Do we have a motion from the board?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the personnel items that are listed.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the personnel items. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We're now at the consent agenda. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move we approve the consent agenda. I'll have a couple of questions on there once we get it on the floor.
I may have a couple myself. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. We're now at discussion, and I'll call on Mr. Hudson.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to the project that we have going on at Columbia High School, or the proposed project, for the record, let's talk about the funding of that project and where that pot of money's at. If we could, that would, Mr. Superintendent, if you would explain that, or Mrs. Penn, or whoever would explain that to me. I've looked over the project. I agree with the project. I just want to make it clear that this money is not coming out of classroom dollars.
Mr.
Yes,
Cardwell?
sir. It is not, thank you, Mr. Nelson. It isn't coming out of classroom dollars. I'm going to turn this whole portion over to Mr. Whittaker and Mr. Gaylord. And Bonnie can chime in when she wants, but it's definitely not coming out of general revenue. It has no bearing or effect on anything. This is something that we planned on doing because it's more of an infrastructure issue at Columbia High with toilets and piping. And this has been around since 1975 and 6, and the bathrooms and the gang bathrooms are horrific out there as we sit and breathe. What's brought this to the table in May and probably not in July is the fact that we can probably maybe try to get it done this summer now that we're able to move in quickly. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whittaker and Mr. Gaylord. If y'all have any questions, I would defer to them. And Mr. Gaylord, Mr. Whittaker, y'all may want to discuss more about the funding and where it's coming. And Bonnie, if you're still there, and she is, if y'all could address those and answer the questions. Thank you.
Mr. Gaylord, Mr. Whittaker? Can somebody let them know they're muted?
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Ms. Penner may want to respond to the funding issue just to verify what I say is accurate, but a portion of the funding actually is some carryover from last year, the year prior, and the remaining part is from the current year that we're in. So the funding is actually funding that really can only be used for improvements such as what we're doing. Would you verify that, Ms. Penner?
Yes, and it's coming out of, we did get a small amount of PICO revenues this year, and we're using the rest of the dollars are coming from our $1.5 million allocation. Again, some of that $1.5 million is a carry forward from the previous year. The PICO again is from the previous year as well. And some of the $1.5 million is from the current year. So these are all dollars that are required to be used on capital type projects.
And if I can speak specifically to the intent of the project, it, as Mr. Carswell inferred, and each of you know the condition of those restrooms in the commons at Columbia High School, and they're in a, I'll use a tough word, a dire state. They need to have some improvements made. It's been a personal objective for some 10 years to make improvements in there, and we've never had the two things that we needed at the same time. One was time, enough time to get it done and not impact the instructional school year. And the second one was adequate funding to be able to start the project and bring it to a point that we could occupy it and have a safe and comfortable learning environment. And both of those have met together as a result of this plague we're experiencing with the COVID-19 virus. It'll provide improvements to Columbia High School, and I shared this with Mr. Nelson the other day. It'll provide improvements that are unparalleled in what we've done in recent years, with the exception of actually moving the cafeteria to a freestanding building. But it'll provide some additional instructional conference rooms. It'll provide it'll net 4 additional offices that are co-located where they can provide, if you will, a suite of student services for scholarships and what have you. They'll be located in one general area. It'll provide a cross-quarter connection from one of the Mickey Mouse ears to the others that'll relieve some of the burden of that commons area with all the student population in there and trying to transverse to go to different classes from one diagonal of the campus to the other, as well as it'll provide the most needed addition of additional restrooms. There'll be a total of 8 female restrooms that are added, 7 male restrooms, and then something the staff will be pleased with. It'll provide for a staff restroom on each one of the quarters, east and west respectively, where the staff can actually be able to utilize them between class changes and what have you. That pretty much describes the intent. The media center is being condensed. It's being relocated to what you know of as the career center. And then they'll have mini libraries in each one of the classrooms as well. So I can answer specific questions. It's made up of a total of 9,049 square feet, and it'll be a great improvement if the board will approve the project. So any questions, or Mr. Whittegren, anything?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if we approve this today, when will the project begin? And when will be the due date on finishing?
Our intent is to have it completed the week before school start. I know it's a very aggressive schedule, and work has been scheduled where the contractor will have forces on site tomorrow morning to begin their portion of the demolition.
Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Any other questions from the board? Any other questions regarding anything else on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion for, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. No further discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Consent agenda is approved. I don't see anything else for business. Lex, is there anything else you need for business today?
No, sir. If I might, I would just simply, you have in your packet a reopening task force that I've asked Hope Jernigan to chair. She just got back from NEFAC. They had a little meeting at NEFAC this morning. I just want the board to know that we're not pushing this on the forefront, but at the same time, it's popular around the state to start forming these task force. Our number one priority to reopen schools is hopefully turn the key and walk in August, just like we always have. But I think we would not be doing diligence to our community if we did start a task force. So you have a sheet in there that's outlining the task force. I've asked our attorney, Megan Logan, to sit in on these meetings. The first one will be tomorrow at 1. They probably won't meet again until June. But I just wanted to start the process of what education might look like if we can't start back to school as normal in August. So that's all that anything else that I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I did have a call yesterday from the Florida School Board Association regarding reopening and were we doing something similar? So it's hitting at a good time. I would ask, do we have a board member that would like to sit on this task force? I don't see that we have any board member on there. I think it would be nice if we had somebody that was there to kind of just maybe be able to get information back. Anybody interested?
I'm available.
Ms. Smith, I appreciate you volunteering for that. So Lex, are you okay if we add her to that task force?
Yes, we'll put Ms. Smith, Ms. Jernigan sitting with me, so she'll add her to the list and send you out. Ms. Smith, we're meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock here in the auditorium. We're going to face everybody way out, rows apart. And then we're just going to have a discussion in the morning. I also added Mona Simmons to the list for y'all's communication. If something fails, and Ms. Smith can't be there, Mona's going to sit in on y'all's behalf to listen. So you can always call and talk to her as well. But Ms. Smith, you're absolutely welcome. And we may add parents to this later on. Right now, we don't have parents and students, but this might be something we do in June and July. If we see this, if we see it's not going to open up as normal in August, we will ramp this up and probably add students and parents to this task force as well. But right now, Ms. Smith, welcome. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll start going down for board member comments. Mr. Hudson, we'll start with you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, I want to thank the superintendent and his staff for the job they're doing. And I thank them very much for moving forward very cautiously, because having gone through what we went through in 07 and 08, and it's taken so long to bring us back where we were, that's been a difficult path to follow. But I mean, we've had a good staff to do that, and all the work that went into the finance work. And just thank the superintendent for that and his staff. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Ms. Johns.
It's basically echoing Mr. Hudson there. Mr. Carswell, last time I said the same thing. Thank you for everything you're doing, and the administration, just continuing to pray for our district and everything everyone's going through and the decisions, and remember the parents and students and our teachers. And if you talk to them, thank our teachers. And if they're out there listening right now to our meetings, we appreciate everyone in our district. It takes everyone. So thank you. I just want to say, Ms. Smith, thank you for volunteering to be on that committee. And I think that's
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Johns. We'll move on to Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone. I'm excited to see what's going to happen at Columbia High. It sounds like a very horrendous project, but a well-needed project. So I know it's going to be done well if Mr. Gaylord has anything to do with it. Thank you all for all that you do. Mr. Carswell, all I've heard has been positives in the way that we have been handling things throughout this epidemic. So thank you for your staff and everyone who's involved in making this happen.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Ms. Giddens.
Just same thing, echoing what the other board members have said. I've actually gotten calls from board members from other districts who have asked how we were doing things, and the communication from our district office has been excellent, and I appreciate all of you and what you're doing. Our teachers, I wasn't able to comment at the last meeting, but just a shout out to all of our teachers. I know my kids' teachers have probably worked harder during doing distance learning. My kids have been, Hangout and Google Meets and online. And so I just thank you for all that, y'all have done. These teachers have been really working hard. So I appreciate them, and, the creativity of the administration with, the awards ceremonies going on online. Just really, it's been great. The creativity of everybody that y'all have done throughout this for our students. So I'm looking forward to the events coming up for our seniors, and hope we're able to do everything that for them that they deserve. And I appreciate all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Giddens. Mr. Carswell.
Just want to echo that what y'all are saying, and I agree completely. We have the greatest staff by far, everybody in the state. I can't tell you how proud I am to be a part of all this, what we do. But I think it starts with you guys. The 5 of you have set the tone for what we do in our district. So I just want to thank the board for y'all's leadership and all that we're doing, and just echo what everybody said. Our staff is awesome. And I hope we don't have to not replace I don't know how, I got to make sure I word this right. I hope we can replace every unit that we need to make our school district great. And that hopefully we'll see that over the next few weeks. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Carswell. Ms. Logan, I know you're there. Did you have any comments?
No comment.
She said no comment.
I got it. All right. Just from me, I think the CHS project is long overdue. It's something we've been needing to do for quite a while. I'm glad we're able to do a little extra with it and make that school even better. Along the funding line, I was sitting here thinking about it, and even with what the governor's going to put out, and Bonnie kind of hit on it a little bit, and Mr. Hudson lived through it. Just because they give us a budget doesn't mean that's what we're going to end up with. So when we do have our budget conference and kind of sit down, we need to start thinking about, because she showed you the cuts that we had after we had our budget. So, we had a budget, we prepared, we did the things we needed to do, and then they hit us with 3 or 4 or 5 more cuts. I don't even remember how many we had at that point. But what was bad continued to get worse. And I hope we don't see that, but we need to think about it. But anyway, let's get what they're going to give us and have that meeting and prepare to move forward from there. I don't think I have anything else from the board before I wrap us up. All right, guys, I'm going to call us adjourned. Thank you for everybody for getting on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.